What is a true fact so baffling? It should be false. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Raditha that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food they can get brain damage. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of and north of Iceland. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill, under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake, no food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the pub ID is PMC 2,495,396. The life of Frane Selleck, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962, Frane is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963, on his first plane trip he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack, unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. 1966. He was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. 1970. His car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. 1973. In yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. 1995. He was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. 1996. To escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Taser is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle. T-A-S-E-R. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. More people died making the V-2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theatre told his story on national television. Only 4 people have been to the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the ocean. One of those people is James Cameron, the director of Titanic. From 1613 and 1620 a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive. Virginia had been founded for around a decade. Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope. He was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hasekura Tsuneniga, and was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe until around 1860. President John Tyler, born in 1790, has 2 living grandsons. A million seconds ago was week before last, the 24th of July. A billion seconds ago was 1988, 1987. Ed. Made some rounding errors. We're looking at November, 1987. A 500-pound cigarette smoking, beer drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during World War II. Private Wojtek helped the Polish win the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino and was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland. If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock paper scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, losers were knocked out and winners stayed on, etc., you would only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.53 billion people on the planet. The longest time between two twins being born is 87 days. There is no universally accepted definition of vegetable. It's a cultural and culinary term, and varies from place to place. In chess there are over 9 million variations after just 3 moves each. 288 billion different possible positions after 4 moves each. In a complete game there are more possible positions than there are electrons in the observable universe. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. There is an extremely rare condition called Stone Man syndrome. It causes any smallest damage done to tissue to regrow into a bone. Speaking briefly, people affected by this sickness slowly turn into living statues as they get older. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the sun. The reason for this is that to fly directly into the sun you need to first launch from Earth, and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required for that to do it directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than getting basically anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but plans to make the closest passes than any probe ever has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post they are 1 week shy of a year in. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. If you shrink down our sun to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be equal to the size of the continental United States. Space is huge. Stalin, Hitler, and Freud all lived in Vienna at the same time. When Mt. Everest was first measured it was exactly 29,000 feet. It was reported as 29,002, because exactly 29,000 was not believable. Even if 99% of Earth's population thought you were unattractive, 76 million people would still find you attractive. GPS satellites have to compensate for time dilation, because time runs at a different rate in orbit. We live many times closer to the last dinosaur than the first and last dinosaur did to each other. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening even though it's 93 miles away. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1819. This means that he went his early childhood without going through his dinosaur phase sad face. The phrase plastic surgery has nothing to do with the material. Plastic surgery as a field predates the development of plastics by 70 years. The two terms simply share a Greek word root meaning sculpted or reshaped. When a woman with breast implants is cremated, the implants will melt into goo. It drips to the bottom of the furnace and needs to be cleaned up once cooled. A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel. To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electron is 16 times longer than the distance between the Sun and Pluto. If Earth was a basketball, to scale the moon would be a tennis ball. It would orbit around 7.5 meters away, which is a lot farther than most people think. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was a tennis ball, to scale the electron would orbit at about 2,500 meters away. There is no ball small enough to compare to how small electrons would still be at this scale. The record for most children born to one mother is 69. To the wife of Fyodor Vasilyev, B. 1707 c. 1782, a peasant from Shua, Russia. In 27 labors, she gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets and 4 sets of quadruplets. You see your nose all the time, but your brain just ignoring it. The Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than it did the Stegosaurus. Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years. And, for fun, one of my favorites. Woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built. There is no good metric for the number of languages on Earth. This is mostly because linguists cannot agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric of how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. You can fit every planet between the Earth and Moon, including all the gas giants. But if you lined up all of Jeff Bezos's money from end to end, it wouldn't fit between the Earth and Moon. It could go to the Moon and back 34 times. Jeff Bezos has enough money to make a ladder to the Moon. And to make it out of money. You are closer to being a millionaire than Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. It's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and huge balls. In Florida it is illegal to tie an elephant to a parking meter without first paying the meter, as if the elephant were a car. Where in Florida do you find live elephants? Please don't say Disney World and Dumbo.